I would request everyone to take a seat. We can start. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our Chancellor, Sri Naveen Jindal, and our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Rajkumar, I extend a very hearty welcome to our distinguished guests from Herbert Smith Freelhills. We are very grateful to you, sir and ma'am, that you have spared so much time to be with us today and have taken time off to interact with young Jindalites. And I assure you that Jindalites here are a very special and endearing set of people. And we really appreciate that you are here to interact with us. And we know that Herbert Smith Freelhills has been a huge part of the growth that Jindal has undergone in the past 10 years. And we wish to continue the same in the coming times. And we look forward to an invigorating and stimulating discussion today and some pearls of motivation and guidance from both of you. Friends, HSF, as you all know, is located in the heart of City of London. Founded 150 years ago, they have the top UK lawyers, which has grown exponentially worldwide. And they're part of a leading-edge professional service projects and business. And they're leaders in dispute resolution and cross-border transactions. And we're really lucky to have Mr. Chris Parsons over here and Ms. Shruti Anand with us here today. So to introduce them, it's my proud privilege to introduce Mr. Chris Parsons, who's the chairman of the Indian practice of the firm, and he's the guiding force behind the global Indian practice. He also heads the firm's social initiatives in India. He spends a lot of his time in India and considers it almost a second home. All thanks to him that in this very small time, there's been such a great outreach within India, and HSF has worked with different social initiatives, including the HSF Bridge, including different competitions of negotiation and moot court all across India. Mr. Parsons himself is a proponent of mental health, and at the same time, with his main work, he's also involved in one of the biggest deals in Indian history. And just to name one, which I know all of you would have studied in company law and taxation, that's with regards to the Vodafone and SR case. And I would like you all to put your hands together for Mr. Chris Parsons. Moving to our second guest of the evening, Ms. Shruti Anand. She is a graduate solicitor at Herbert Smith Freelhills. And she is a lawyer with keen interest in technology, law, and everything in between. She has had a varied, so she graduated from the reputed NUJS Kolkata, and she went on to work with HSF first as a vacation scheme student, and later she's also dangled a lot of internships during her law school, which have culminated in her work at HSF. And today she'll be sharing with us her own experience as part of the India internship and now as the trainee solicitor. Please welcome her. Thank you so much. Ma'am, I would request you.
I just wanted to tell you what we were going to cover today. I wanted to start by a big thank you. One, that we're here and you're here to listen to what we've got to say. But as importantly, that we postponed the event from 6 o'clock until 4 o'clock, and then we ended up being slightly late, so I apologise about that. Thank you all for being here. Can I just be clear, are you all first, second and third years, or are there other year groups as well? Final year, 2 years. Okay, super. So final year. Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you. So what we're going to do, as Karen has kindly explained, is she's just going to tell you just a very little bit about HSF, but more importantly to tell you about the Indian internship program and to tell you what life has been like for her, because not so long ago she was pretty much sitting where you're sitting today. So she's closer to what you might be thinking, what you might be feeling, and the sort of questions you might want to ask. I'm then separately going to talk to you about a topic that I feel very passionate about, and that's the importance of looking after our mental wellness. And so I'm going to talk to you about that after
Can you hear me? Yeah? Right, that's... can I have a quick show of hands? How many first, second, third years of the 5-year batch? Okay, good. So when we did this talk in NLS last week, we had 70% were fourth years, so it was clear that come for the pizza, not really for the talk, which is fine, which is perfectly fine, but I was just checking how many students were there today. So I'm just going to do a couple of things, like Chris said, very quickly run through, one, the India internship program, and two, sort of my training contract for the last 1.5 years at HSF, and then, like he said, give you an opportunity to ask questions, either to me or later when he's done with his presentation as well. So as she's already mentioned, HSF is an international firm. It's got offices all over the world. There's some facts and figures there. So we've got 27 offices in 20 countries, more than 5,000 employees. So it's a mammoth undertaking to run a firm of this size. And I think just very quickly on, I'll start with why I sort of apply to HSF, because I know that a lot of us have options when we apply to VAC schemes. So the two main reasons why I applied to HSF particularly, and one of them was the people. So I was quite clear that if I was moving halfway around the world to start a job, I need to work in an environment that's welcoming, and that's accepting of who I am. Whether that's me being a woman, whether that's me being a brown person working in the Western world. So in whatever capacity, I was very clear that I had to go to a place that was sort of more than just a workplace. And I'm quite happy to say that HSF genuinely, I think, takes its role as a champion of diversity very, very seriously, and it's not just lip service. A good example of that is, I think, just the number of Indian trainees that have qualified there and who work across HSF's depth and breadth of practices. And when HSF says we have an open door policy, I think they genuinely mean it. So a good example would be, there's lots of times where I've been interested in working with certain partners or certain senior associates, and all I've had to do is just, email them to say, you're doing this work, I'm very keen on working with you on this, can we please have a quick chat? And I've never had anyone turn me down. I've never had anyone say no, or I'm too busy. And I think the best example is when I actually was doing this trip, I mentioned to Chris, he was doing some meetings in Bangalore, and I said, look, I've been working with you on some of the BD work, and I come to Bangalore, and he was more than happy to have me help him with his BD work and the meetings in Bangalore. And I think it's quite rare that the partnership and the senior leadership in a firm puts its faith in trainees and young associates, and I think that's one of the defining sort of qualities and a big differentiator that HSF has with other firms that I know of in the UK or elsewhere. So that's one big reason. The second was, and this was important to me personally, was the depth of sector expertise. So I was quite clear that HSF is one firm. So for example, other firms have, you'd have 5 different sub-practices within finance or banking, which is great, but I was quite clear I wanted breadth of broad sector expertise. And just to give you a flavor of the kind of work I've done, my first seat was in real estate. My second was TMT, so technology, media, and telecoms. My third has been cybersecurity, and I'm now going into competition. So I've done a fairly wide swathe of work within each seat, and I've worked in sectors like, obviously, tech, media, because I was in the team, and I worked in pharmaceuticals. I've done work for the energy sector, obviously real estate because of my first seat. So I've done work in a wide variety of sectors, and the people who work in these sectors are real specialists. They do know what they're doing. They know their job really well. And that was quite important for me to be able to work quite commercially and in an environment which encourages business thought, which I think HSF particularly does because of its depth of sector. So I think those were 2 big reasons for me to sort of consider applying to HSF, and I'm happy to say I wasn't disappointed on either front. So just very quickly to run through some of the work I've done in my seats. So for example, in TMT, I did this, we did some very interesting work where I remember the client, I think, called up my supervisor when she was in the middle of a ski trip, and he said, look, we're looking to engage in a sponsorship deal with this major F1 company, car company, and we want the transactions, we want the documents to be prepared, and we want legal advice. And it was a week of sleepless nights for all of us, but we gave the advice, we created the documentation, and the deal went through. I think it was the fastest deal for that client that we had done. And we didn't get F1 tickets, unfortunately, which I was quite disappointed about. But we did do some very, very good work for the client, and they were really happy. So that was a really, really interesting deal that I'd worked on for a big client. I remember the CEO of this F1 company just called up and spoke to my supervisor, and he came into office. So it's one of those things that you read in the papers about somebody, and you want to meet them. They're quite awe-inspiring, and you actually get to meet them because of the work you do and the clients that you're dealing with. So I think that kind of the experience of having that is quite rare, and HSF gives you a fair opportunity to have those experiences. The other one, which is particularly interesting, was in my cybersecurity seat. It's broadly a dispute seat. So we do court disputes like software theft and stuff like that. And we're doing this one dispute where it's very full on James Bond like, where we're trying to enforce action against some Russians who've stolen some software from a big gaming company. So we're actually having private investigators go down and deal with these Russians, and they're having aliases, and they're reporting back to us. So it's quite scary because on the one hand you think you're probably going to be shot somewhere, but it's also very, very exciting work, and you're genuinely learning a lot as you're doing it. A big perk, which unfortunately I didn't get to experience, but I know somebody did, was that this client had some meetings at her yacht in Monaco. So some people got to go and do the meetings. They were flown from I think Heathrow to her yacht in Monaco and had the meetings there. So you get these perks which are add-ons to the job, which is quite fun if you get a chance to do them. So I think that's sort of broadly the billable, the business work that I've done. And apart from just your transactional work, you have a lot of other opportunities within the firm. One of the biggest ones is the pro bono opportunities. So irrespective of what kind of pro bono work you like, there's always a chance to get involved in something. So all the trainees, for example, go to a legal advice clinic quite close to the office every 6 weeks on rotation. And you take up smaller claims, but you do take up claims on a one-on-one basis. So you're the one talking to the client, you're the one drafting the documentation, you're the one giving the advice. And I know a friend of mine who's actually a first-seat trainee, so he's barely 6 months into the job. He's doing advocacy, so he's actually arguing in a trial for a client. And it's a small claim, but it's such an interesting opportunity to be able to present an argument at such an early stage in your career. And he's obviously got help from associates and I think some partners, but he is doing the advocacy. And not just, Whitechapel is a sort of a much more systematic thing that all trainees do, but I think there's lots of other pro bono opportunities as well. For example, we have this thing called the Fair Deal Sierra Leone, where we advise the government of Sierra Leone we provide legal advice on their investments. And I know some people who've gone on secondments for 6 months to Sierra Leone to advise the government. So you can get involved in pretty much any kind of, whether it's pro bono work, whether it's BD work, whether it's even billable work, as long as you just show your interest. And everyone's more than happy to get you involved in whatever you want to get involved in. Apart from sort of your broader pro bono and billable work, there's also loads of social activities within the firm. So we have drinks every Friday, which is fun, obviously. We've got lots of social events. We've got Christmas parties, summer parties, which each team has by itself. And you've also got lots of associations and committees within the firm. So I chair the Women Trainee Lawyers Network, which is a cause quite close to my heart. So we promote the interests of women trainees within the firm and have skill development workshops for them, confidence building workshops, and we try to engage, we get speakers from outside to engage with them. So you can pretty much, I guess my point is there's such a wide range of things you can do within the firm, both in terms of just billable work as well as work outside your regular 9 to 6 job, that I think it's really worth experiencing that, and I think I've had a very fulfilling 1.5 years at the firm so far. So just very quickly, I'll run through the India internship program and sort of how it works before moving on to Life at London, and I'll hand over to Chris for his piece. So I think the way it works is, obviously some of your friends had interviews today, but I think the way it works is you fill in the application form, you have some tests that you have to do, and then you have the interview, that assessment center interview as you did today, and you get selected for the vacation scheme, which is basically a 3-week internship program. And you sit in 2 seats, so you do 2 weeks in one seat and 1 week in the other, and you sit like you sit as if you were a trainee. So you sit with a supervisor, you have designated tasks, designated work to complete in that 2 weeks, and you get feedback on the work you've done. You get paid, I think, £400 and you get paid in cash, so you can blow it all up if you want to. So you get paid, your accommodation is taken care of, your flights to and fro are taken care of, and I think you also, you get a stipend, as I said. So apart from that, you've got, so the way it works is apart from the work you do, you've got a bunch of social networking events, and the idea of the vacation scheme is for the firm to try and tell you why, for the firm to tell you why it thinks you're a good fit, and for you to see that for yourself, because only if you're actually there in London experiencing what that's like will you be able to know. So you've got a bunch of social networking events with the other vacation schemers, and it's really fun because I think we had a darts event. Lots of them have alcohol, lots of them don't, but you will have fun either way. So we had some darts event. Somebody else had they had some dancing. They had a bunch of other stuff. So you've got a fair bit of networking which you can do as well, both among the other vacation schemers and also among the associates and the partners who will come down to share a drink with you on a Friday evening. You've also got, during the vacation scheme, you've got different teams talking to you about the work they do and about why the work is interesting, what you can get involved in as a trainee, so you can kind of plan in advance and pick your seats if you're successful in the training contract interview. And at the end of your 3 weeks of your vacation scheme, every vacation schemer sits for a TC interview, which is typically with one of the partners in the firm, and you're quizzed on the work you've done, you're quizzed on your motivations to live in London, to work at HSF, and you hear back, I think, in a couple of weeks from your interview. So that's the broad sort of vac scheme process. And I think the one thing I said at NLU Delhi yesterday, and what I'll say here is that you've got nothing to lose. It certainly is an experience worth doing in itself. I think it really sort of gives you an indication of what life is like at the firm. It's not too far removed from what your training contract is like. Obviously, it's a much shorter duration, but I think there are lots of similarities both in your work as well as your social life in the firm. So it's certainly worth doing, and if everything is paid for, it's all the better, because you don't really lose much by applying. So I would encourage you all to please apply, and obviously I'm here to answer any questions that you have on the vaccine itself. Just final quick run through, because I've been asked this question before about living in London. So the one thing I would say is, and I said this to somebody today as well, is that it's one of those cities that's got something for everybody. So it doesn't matter what you like, what you don't like, you've always got something to keep you occupied. So for example, I'm a huge sports fanatic, and I've had a chance to, I've been lucky enough to watch the Wimbledon. I've watched the Ashes. I've also watched the World Cup. So I will eventually, hopefully, go for a football match, although I'm not particularly interested, but I will go nevertheless. But I have a chance because of the proximity because just things just keep happening in London all the time. I'm also a huge theatre buff, so I have seen quite a few plays in London, and London it's quite a vibrant city for theatre. So whether you're into music, whether you're into sport, whatever it is, it's got something for each of you, and it's one of those cities that's just got so many people from so many parts of the world. It's very multicultural. You end up fitting right in. You don't really stand out, which is a good thing, because you want to be able to assimilate. You want to be able to be comfortable in your own skin, and you can be comfortable because everyone's so different. Everyone's just come from different parts of the world. So you all kind of just amalgamate in this wonderful city. I've also traveled extensively just because of the location and just where UK is and London is. You're able to travel quite a bit. So I've been to the south of France, I've been to Scotland, and it's all easy access. It's not very difficult to access these places with a little bit of planning. So it's been great because you've got enough time, to be honest, within the firm with your work commitments to be able to do this other stuff. So I play for a club on most weekends and most Tuesday evenings. And it would be hard if I didn't have, a great working culture or a good rapport with people in the firm. But the firm's very encouraging, I think, of people following their passions outside of work as well. So I strongly think if work, you know, if that's important to you, if enjoying the city as much as it is important to you as much as enjoying your work, I think HSF is certainly very, very encouraging of that. I think the last thing I will sort of leave you with is, and I've been asked this question, so I will kind of preempt it, is the cost of living. I wouldn't say London is a cheap city to live in, but I think with a little bit of planning, you can do most of what you want, and you can also save. I've managed to save a reasonable amount, but also not compromise on the things that I want to do, including the travel that I want to do. So I think with some planning, it is possible. So I think I'll just leave you with that. I think what I want to say is you lose nothing by applying for the VAC scheme. It's actually an exceptional opportunity, and hopefully some of you would have heard from your friends to understand the firm and understand the city and its culture better. And yeah, I hope to see many of you apply next year and see you at the firm next year. Thank you.
Did people want to ask questions about HSF or anything that should be had to say at this stage before I go and do something on mental well-being? Yeah, please.
So what are the credentials that you look for in somebody when you're looking to give them a scheme at your firm? And what are the areas that you mostly like that you work in order to assess them?
Yeah, the answer to that is I'm going to do it in two parts. The first part is that in broad terms, we're looking for people who are academically strong, but are able to apply that academic legal knowledge in a practical way to practical circumstances. That's the first point. The second point is that we are looking for people who are, I remind everyone that what we do is a professional service, and the service being the operative word. And therefore, in addition to being good lawyers, we should be people who are good at getting on with other people. We should have strong communication skills. We should have other interests outside our narrow interests of the law. And I remember one lawyer once describing this as the 3 a.m. test. If you've been doing a deal, night after night, and you're there with your lawyer at 3 a.m. in the morning, is the client still happy to be with you? Or are they thinking, once this deal's over, I'm happy that I never see this lawyer again? So there's something really important around that service piece. And then the other one, I think, is just that willingness to be challenging, to be proactive, not this sense of I'll do what I'm asked to do. We want people to really think proactively about how can I find a solution in a creative way to this problem. So that's slightly generic, I know, and it's inevitably going to be that case, which is why I'll mention the second part of it is, and I guess this is Shruti's point, you won't know whether you have a chance of working at an international law firm if that's what you want to do, unless you try. Is it competitive? Yes, it's highly competitive. But it's highly competitive to join Goldman Sachs, to join Facebook, to join Google, to join some of the great companies in India. All right, they're all highly competitive. But unless you try, you won't have an opportunity. All right, so I really encourage people to have a go, because once you then get to the interview, actually everything that's gone before doesn't matter. It's you with the interviewer. I was graduate recruitment partner for 6 years. I've had lots and lots of experience of interviewing people. Mark Bardell, who was with us both earlier in the week, equally has lots of experience. The people who do the interviewing at the firm are enormously experienced. And once you're there, face to face, the critical part of the interview process is around the case study. And the case study, I won't pretend, is not challenging. All right, there's a lot of information, as I'm sure you'll understand if you were to speak to the candidates that we interviewed today. All right, but it's your ability to assimilate a lot of information and to make sense of words. Because as lawyers, we spend a lot of time making sense of words. Whether it's a contract, whether it's a statute, whether it's a case, whatever it is, we want to interpret those words in a way that makes some sense and to explain why we've come to that decision. So I hope that gives you something of what we're looking for. All right.
And I think just taking off this point there, the reason I think the information at this stage is quite generic is because one of the good things is there's no HSF type. So there's no HSF type. So there's not to mold yourself to be a certain kind of person. Yes, certain skills are welcome because just the nature of the job is that you use certain skills again and again. But having said that, I would, when you're applying, I encourage you to all just, it's a cliche, but be yourself. Because it does work. It does work magically well at HSF specifically because everyone's encouraged to be different and everyone's encouraged to celebrate those differences. So genuinely think about what you really want, what you are going to apply as well. Yes.
You mentioned talking about there being certain tests that you take for the application procedure. What are those tests? What are they about?
So my memory could be a bit hazy because I did them 3 years ago. But my understanding is there's normally a logical reasoning test. Is that correct? Yes, there's normally a logical reasoning test. I think it's after your application, which tests your ability to think logically and come up with an approximation of what is the right answer, because we recognize that it's not going to be black and white. There's got to be some sort of critical thinking involved. So that's normally what the test is about. I think there used to be lots of others.
We've decided that what that test is not helpful. You'll know because you've just done it. Is it the verbal reasoning test now? It's a situational judgment test. Okay, we had a whole raft of them. So the one that we've stuck with and we think is helpful is called the situational judgment test. And so an example might be you're a trainee in the Hong Kong office. It's 9 o'clock on a Friday night. The partner's gone. Your senior's gone. Client rings up with this question: what do you do? All right. So it's how might you cope in a given set of circumstances. So that's the situational judgment test. We obviously think that's helpful, being determinative in terms of the type of people we're looking for.
I actually got this question on my training contract. Okay. I didn't know what to say for the first 3 seconds, but I did. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, look, there'll be a chance when I finish speaking as well to ask anything else you want. But thank you, Shruti. And look, if there's any doubt in your minds about whether we think that trainees have a valuable role to play at the firm, you should genuinely ask Shruti, because I have found Shruti's support, particularly on Indian unicorns and soonicorns, and on investors into those companies like Alibaba, like Ant Financial, like SoftBank, etc. Shruti has been incredibly helpful and supportive to me on feeding me the sort of information that I need to be able to speak to clients. And so please do ask her whether that's true or not. But so please don't doubt that we really value the input of good trainees within the firm. I'm now going to speak to you about a topic that I feel very strongly about, which is the importance of all of you and me looking after their mental well-being. And it's a topic that is... Would you really like to use the slides? It's a topic that will be relevant to you, I can tell you. And whether it's relevant because you yourself will suffer a mental health issue, or a friend will suffer it, or a colleague will suffer it, or a family member will suffer it, but I guarantee, I'm afraid, during the course of your lives, mental health issues will be an issue to you, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So, what I'm not going to do is to tell you that there are clever ways in which you can lose stress from your lives, because you can't. Alright? And stress is important, because it gets you out of bed in the morning. It means that when you do things, you can be satisfied and happy. It means that you can be enthusiastic about a job well done. And so stress can be incredibly helpful to you. It can also make you very unwell. And it's where stress starts making you unwell that I'm going to start talking about. Okay, there's an economic position here, which is that even if you think, well, stress, anxiety, that's for other people, that's not a worry for me, this will impact organisations that you work in, it will impact countries, and these are just some statistics produced by the World Health Organization, that by 2030, 2 billion people every year will suffer from some unhelpful form of mental ill health. All right? It is the biggest form today of disability in the workplace. Yeah? It's not an operation that you've had. It's not cancer. It's not diabetes. It's not heart disease. It's some kind of mental health issue. All right? That's the reason that you will either not be at work, or you will be at work and underperforming because you're not well. A figure I can't even get my head around, but $16 trillion is expected to be lost to the world economy every year as a result of people having mental ill health. It's the biggest crisis facing the corporate world today. So, as part of that, I'm going to tell you my story. Alright? Because in telling you my story, I want you to understand that it's very easy to think that everyone else is alright and you're not. Alright? It's very easy for you to look at my CV and think that Chris Parsons has had a glittering career and surely he can't have suffered from mental ill health reasons. You would be very, very wrong to assume that. So I'm going to start with very quickly telling you my Facebook story. So this is how to get the wrong impression of Chris Parsons. Or at least only half the story. So half the story is that I started my career in London in 1985, so I've been at the firm for 35 years. I moved from London to Hong Kong to work for a year, which was, I have to say, at times, absolutely amazing. And that's pretty much the view I had of Hong Kong Harbour from the flat that I lived in on Kennedy Road from 1986 to 1987. I then moved back to London, and as a partner, I was asked to take responsibility for our offices in Southeast Asia, and I was based in Singapore, and I flew around the region helping clients and helping to manage our offices. And I sat on all of our management boards in Hong Kong. If you're not already jealous, I also, for the last 20 years, was the, and am, to date, the Italian relationship partner for the firm. So I spent a lot of time in Italy, in particular, working on our relationships with Italian law firms. And I have to say, a lot of that was not challenging, a lot of that was really very fantastic. And Italy's a wonderful country, and I often visited Milan and Rome. And in fact, I was in both cities in June, so just a couple of months ago. The last 15 years I've spent in India, and I spend normally 2 weeks every month in India. So on that basis, I've lived in India for the last 7.5 years. And India, unquestionably, has been the best, most contented time of my career, for reasons that I'll explain in a moment. So that's it. That's the Facebook page. London, Hong Kong, Singapore, Italy, and India. What possibly could be the problem with Chris Parsons? Now I'll tell you the other half of the story. So the other half of the story, I guess I just need to tell you one thing. I sit on the board of a mental health charity called MQ Mental Health Research. It's the leading research charity into mental well-being in the UK, and as a consequence, one of the leading ones in the world. And what the research from that organisation tells you is that 75% of us who go on to struggle with mental health issues, the seeds of those issues are sown in childhood. The seeds are sown in childhood, before 18. Right? That's not to say that if you have the most perfect childhood, you won't go on and encounter mental health issues later. But there is a good chance that if you had some challenges in your childhood, that you may well go on to encounter mental health issues later. And this was very much true. In my case, I had a very, very difficult relationship with my dad. My dad regarded me as, at best, an irritant, at worst, public enemy number one. He couldn't wait for me to leave home. He shouted at me most days, he made me cry most days, and he was very, very jealous of the, I guess, the relationship I had with my mum. And you know, and the relationship I had with my mum was the natural relationship that a child has with its mother. But it meant that her emotional energies, emotional support, her focus was often on her children, not necessarily on my father, and he found that problematic. And so things were difficult with my dad, and as a result, nobody used to come round to my house because everyone was as frightened of my dad as I was, and that meant that I grew up with a worldview that the world was a difficult, dangerous, uncertain, unreliable place. And I took that worldview into university, I took that worldview into the office. So it meant that I was a very anxious child. In order to deal with that anxiety, I did what a lot of people do, and that's called self-medication. And self-medication can take many, many, many different forms, all right? A healthy form of self-medication would be exercise. I used to exercise as well, so that was some healthy form of self-medication. My unhealthy form of self-medication was alcohol. I began a long and deep and passionate relationship with alcohol. And if you have a long and deep and passionate relationship with alcohol, sooner rather than later, you will form an addiction. I formed an addiction. I became an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic. I cannot drink alcohol safely. And so a lot of people think that there is mental health issues on one side and addictions on the other side. Research and my experience and my discussions with individuals tend to tell me that there is a very close relationship between addictions and mental health issues, because we adopt addictions to try and change the way we feel. So for me, alcohol made me change the way I feel. Suddenly, I no longer felt anxious. Suddenly, the world didn't appear to be a difficult or dangerous place. Suddenly, I could be dreamy and think that everything was all right. The problem with alcohol is that you often end up doing and saying things you will regret in the morning. And I too often did things that I said and did that I regretted, that I felt very remorseful. And so it doesn't need to be alcohol, it can be drugs. It doesn't need to be drugs, it can be pornography. It doesn't need to be pornography, it can be gambling. It can be relationships, it can be food. There can be many different things that you can be addicted to. And the definition of addiction is not, in terms of alcoholism, the man lying on a bench, lying on the floor, drinking paraffin or something. It's simply somebody who, when they start drinking, cannot stop. And they cannot prevent themselves drinking in the first place. All right? And actually, the only remedy for addiction, sadly, is abstinence. So my response to addiction is around abstinence. So I cannot drink, must not drink, and that's true of other addictions as well. Exactly the same thing happens in the brain. The dopamine gets triggered, that triggers the reward system, it feels great. All right? It goes back to basic nature, so that if I'm chasing to kill an animal, I've won the race, I've killed the animal, the dopamine's released, the reward centers are activated, everything's cool. Sadly, we found ways to activate the dopamine system without doing anything difficult, challenging, stressful, or things that we need to do to survive. For 20 years I cycled to work. For 20 years I prayed I would be knocked off my bike because I wanted to go to hospital, because I wanted the real reason not to go to work. I didn't want a mental health reason. I managed to keep a lid on things until I made it to equity partner. And at that stage, my body had had enough. My body had had enough of working hard. It had had enough of the alcohol that was being thrust inside it. It had enough of the stresses and the strains that I couldn't cope with. And I collapsed. I was rushed to hospital. I had every single test imaginable done. At the end of that period, the consultant said to me, "Chris, there's nothing wrong with you." And of course that was the worst news I could hear, because meaning there was nothing physically wrong with me, it only left a mental health issue. And stress and anxiety very quickly became a deep depression, and I suffered a full mental breakdown. I was fully and totally incapacitated. What does that look like? I'll tell you what it looked like for me. It meant that my sleep patterns changed. It meant that I was irritable. It meant that making even simple decisions became extremely difficult. It meant that anything that I had joy for in life, I no longer had joy. So if you think today, what gives you joy? Meeting with friends, going to the cinema, listening to music, eating food, meeting with your family, whatever it might be, none of those things any longer give you joy. All right? That's what happens in depression. And ultimately, you view the world as a place in which you do not want to be. And I ended up, at the end of the day, in my bed, under my duvet, crying for days and weeks on end. And so, finally, I had to accept that I wasn't coping. I had to accept that I needed help. I was very fortunate in having a supportive family. The doctors that I went to see were fantastic. Medication, unquestionably, has saved my life. And today, I still take a small tablet every morning, which helps the production of serotonin in my brain. Doctors think that the chemical serotonin helps the question of mood. And when they do tests on people who've had depression, their levels of serotonin in their brain are extremely low. When you get very stressed, when you get very anxious, your serotonin levels get depleted. And I take a small drug that helps the uptake of serotonin in my brain. And counselling, and again, it's something I regard myself as very fortunate about, but we have really excellent psychotherapy counsellors in the UK. And so a combination of talking through some of the challenges, particularly around the relationship with my dad, in part around the relationship with my mum, my worldview, unpicking that worldview, understanding why I had that worldview. So a combination of the drug to help the uptake of serotonin and counselling were very significant in my slow recovery. I mentioned I went to Singapore, and actually I now know the reason I went to Singapore. I went to Singapore to run away. I went to Singapore to do what all good alcoholics would call a geographic. You go to a new place, a new environment, new people, new circumstances. The problem with doing a geographic is I went with me. And I went with me with all the same issues I've had in London. I just took them to Singapore. Exactly the same problem happened back in London. And so my summary is that whatever your mental health issue is, that it is truly terrible. All right? I wouldn't wish serious mental health issues on any of you. All right? And that's why I'm talking about it. And whatever that might be, it could be severe anxiety, it could be eating disorders, it could be body dysmorphia, it could be schizophrenia, it could be borderline personality disorder. So there are lots and lots of different forms of mental health issues, all of which are truly awful and need to be helped and need to be addressed. And I'm afraid there is something about the profession of law, and there's something about the people that are attracted to the profession of law that are particularly susceptible to mental health issues. There's something around the perfectionism. There's something around the stresses and strains of long hours. There's something about going to bed with 50 outstanding points on the list of things that you've still got to do that have an ability to make us unwell. And I finally needed to face some facts. I needed to change the nature of what I did. The vast majority of people who have mental health issues who make 100% recovery, all right? There are a small group, a smaller group, of which I am one, that needed to make a more dramatic change to what I did. And I was fortunate within the firm to be able to change my role such that I do now what investment bankers refer to as origination. In other words, I win new work, but I don't sit and execute that transaction. So a lot of what I do, a lot of people might regard as more stressful than actually doing the work, because I'm often meeting new people, I'm flying around the world, I'm speaking at conferences. There's lots of what I do that might be thought of as being stressful. They happen not to stress me. So this is some practical guidance about what we do as an organisation. Awareness is the critical starting point. So for all of you to be aware that mental health issues are very real, they're not talked about nearly enough, there's a stigma against them, but until we as a society in India or elsewhere are willing to understand and talk about the challenges that will arise as a result of mental health issues, we will make no progress. We will make no progress. So the starting point of all of this is awareness. India, I think, there are many aspects of Indian society that I think helps support good mental health. So, in many ways, you can make arguments that the family, the extended family and the community and things can be very supportive. I also believe, in speaking to many of my Indian friends, that that same family, that same community can be very counterproductive. Why is it counterproductive? Because the family will say, it'll pass. The family will say, this is not really an issue. The family will say, snap out of it. The family will say, please don't discuss this outside the family because it will bring shame on the family. The family will say, please don't take Western medications because you'll get addicted to it and won't be able to get over it. All right? So there are many reasons why I think the Indian experience mitigates against recovery in mental health. I also think, sadly, that there is a very unhealthy work culture in India. It's even worse than the work cultures in Europe, even worse than in the UK, even worse than in the States. Shruti, I know, met a number of her friends after dinner last night, and for them it was a short interlude before going back to the office at midnight. All right? And that sense of long hours, of perhaps 7 days a week, of having feeling you have little or no control over your life, are all major factors in making people unwell. And that's why the attrition rates for lawyers in India are really high. That's not a good thing, because India is then losing the benefit of super talented lawyers by putting them into a machine that spits them out the other end. And part of my role is to try and normalise the conversation around mental health issues. And as soon as people are willing to talk about it, and to be open about it, and to be trusting about it, that very fact reduces the stresses and strains and stigmas around it. All right? I've seen significant progress in the UK. I've seen significant progress at HSF because of our cultural approach to mental health issues. And my dream is that one day mental ill health will be treated exactly the same as physical ill health. None of you would have a problem in saying to your boss at work or to your supervisor at university, I have an appendicitis, I need to go to hospital, I need an operation, and I need a time to recover. Why should it be any different if you have a significant mental health issue? It should not be. These are my tips. This is my final slide. Okay, so these are my tips. Exercise now, and the endorphins that it produces in my body are, apart from caffeine, I guess, my only drug. And at least that's a reasonably healthy drug. And so exercise is and continues to be important. I happen to be a Christian. I know a lot of you will have faith of some type. And for me, and actually the research shows that people who have faith actually are better able to deal with mental health issues. I pray about issues both in the morning and evening. I have very, very strong views about smartphones. They are, says the man with his smartphone, they are wonderful, and they keep us in touch, and they give us access to information that we wouldn't ordinarily be able to get so quickly. They also drive us mad. They're also shouting at us. They're also saying, look at me. And there's lots of research to suggest that if we are better, more sensible, more measured in our use of mobile technology, we would all be rather better. Two of my sons, I've got 3 sons and a daughter, 2 of my sons have unilaterally taken the decision that their smartphone will never go into their bedroom. It's not the last thing they do at night, it's not the first thing they do in the morning. Not because of me, because they've separately decided that's a sensible thing to do. And I have to say I commend them for that. I'm much better at recognising the symptoms. I know when I'm starting to get stressed. I know when my life is getting a bit frazzled. I know when I'm buzzing. That sense of you've got so much on, you really don't. So I know to stop, I know to take a break. I know it's important to get a good night's sleep. Please, please, all of you, if you've not read Why We Sleep by Professor Matthew Walker, please get it and read it in the next 2 weeks. All right? You will never think about sleep in the same way again. All right? And the gentleman wisely standing at the back, somebody said, what shall I do to prepare for the Herbert Smith Freelhills interviews tomorrow? His advice was, get a good night's sleep. All right? Best advice possible. Clear thinking, relaxed mind, able to deal with complicated positions. It'd be very easy. I'm not even going to ask when you stayed up half the night. Very easy to think, I'd be much better if I stay up half the night and think about all the questions I might be asked. All right? Get a good night's sleep. It's brilliant for memory. It's brilliant for learning new things. It's brilliant for the immune system. All right? Why We Sleep, Professor Matthew Walker, change your lives. While you're waiting for the book on Why We Sleep to arrive, watch the TED Talk by Brené Brown called The Power of Vulnerability. Has anyone watched Brené Brown, The Power of Vulnerability? 2 of you. Thank you. Please, the rest of you. 15 minutes. It'll be one of the best 15 minutes you spend. Brené Brown looks at the reasons why people are in a good place, not why they're in a bad place. One of the reasons that people are in a good place is if they are part of a community. They have a strong network of friends and mates. The danger is when you suffer from a mental health issue, the first thing you choose to do, the first thing I choose to do is to isolate. All right? It's not a good thing to do. We're designed as human beings for community. All right? and sort of think about that. The other thing we're designed for is being ourselves. All right? Every single one of you, and me, and Shruti, and your faculty have been given different gifts in life, and they've been given different gifts at different measures, whether it's a gift of patience, of kindness, of brilliance in working out mathematical formulas, of understanding extremely dense text, will all be given, every single one of us will be given different gifts in this room. If you want to be sick, spend your life wishing you had everyone else's gifts. It's a perfect way to make yourself ill. I wish I was as clever as them. If only I could do what they did, and then I'd be really rich, and then I'd be really happy. All right? You don't have their gifts. You've been given some special gifts. And altogether, those gifts make us a wonderful community. All right? So please recognize, quicker than I did, that each of us is unique. Each of us has our own gifts. And those gifts are enough. So her ultimate proposition is, can we, each of us, look in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm a bit broken, things could be a little better, but you know what, I'm enough. And I finally got to a position where I recognise that maybe Chris Parsons is enough. Okay, so watch Brandon Brown, please. Two quick other points, and then I'm going to stop. I feel very strongly that if we can introduce our passions into our lives and into our jobs and into our day-to-day existence, that will be a very effective tool for keeping us well. All right? And so, to give a practical example, I now, clearly, as you can all hear, have a passion about sharing the importance of understanding about mental ill health. All right? And I've been able to introduce that into my job. I have a passion for teaching. I've been able to introduce that into my job. I have a passion for reading. And I now make notes about the books that I read, so I can then introduce those into meetings with clients and things. So I'm using my passions to integrate into the rest of my life. Rather than having the rest of my life and my passions here, try and integrate them if you can. All right? I want to discourage all of you and the rest of the world talking about work-life balance. I don't like the expression work-life balance because it makes it sound as though life is good and work is bad. All right? If that's true, you will spend 70% of your time, maybe longer. If you're lawyers at firms that I won't mention the name of, maybe you'll spend 85% of your life doing something that under that construction is bad. All right? I much more encourage us all to think about having a balanced life. And so for me, the more I can introduce aspects of what I love into my day-to-day existence, the more I achieve a balanced life. All right? I feel finally, having lived for 20 years at HSF, being pretty miserable. Does anyone know a song sung by Nicki Minaj and Drake called Moment for Life? Yep. Yep. If you don't know it, listen to it. It's a pretty cool song. I haven't heard it. Somebody played it to me when I did a course at Regent's University recently. Drake says, all of us die, but not all of us live. All of us die, but not all of us live. That really resonated with me. Because for 20 years, I wasn't living. I was surviving. I was hanging in there. I was putting on a brave face. But I was pretty miserable. All right? And at times I was more than pretty miserable. There were times I didn't want to be here. All right? So please, 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 all of us will die sadly, but all of us, let's try and live in the meantime. All right? And I think with that, I'm going to leave it. So I'm just going to open that up again and just say, look, are there any more questions on HSF? Any more questions on the internship program or what Shruti's talked about? Or any questions or observations on anything I've just had to say? I think my only plea to you, and there's just going to be one plea, is please start the conversation today with somebody you trust. All all right? Because the more we talk about this stuff, the more we normalise it. The more we normalise it, the more we're able to reduce the stigma. The more we can reduce the stigma, the better we're all going to be. So, please, any thoughts, observations, questions? No? Okay. No? Did you have something? No? You need to go. Yeah, please.
Firstly, thank you so much for both your presentations. They were excellent. And thank you especially for yours. That was so good. Could you tell us a bit more about the cultural awareness at HSF and the in-house infrastructure you have to deal with mental health and like stress?
Okay. Look, what I'll tell you quickly is my experience is much more of the London office. And we're trying to replicate what we do in London and elsewhere, and we're at various stages of doing that. In Australia, for example, we've done lots of amazing work as well. So I put London and Australia on par. In other offices, we've got some work to do. So what are the things that we've done in London? We have talks like this, where people talk about the challenges. And for me, the best thing is it's not just partners talking about it, because the easy thing is to dismiss it as, well, it doesn't matter about Chris, because he's senior, he's a partner, they were willing to indulge him. But actually, we've had people in business services, we've had secretaries, we've had associates, and we've had trainees record their stories on video, and it's been shown to all 5,000 members of the firm. All right, so I believe, genuinely have built a culture where people are starting to be brave enough to tell their stories publicly, because they believe, rightly, that it will not affect their careers. All right? We have mental health mentors. So there are 70 people listed on our intranet, our internal intranet, that people know that if they don't want to speak to their boss, they don't want to speak to their supervisor, they can speak to any one of these 70 people to say, you know what, I'm struggling at the moment. What can I do about it? And then in answer to what can I do about it, we are very fortunate in that we have our private healthcare has not only a massive section on physical health, it also has a massive section on mental health. And that means we can have access to doctors, psychiatrists, counsellors, etc. on the basis of a paid-for scheme. All right, so there's just a lot happening. And I'm in Australia from tomorrow morning, and I'm going to be speaking to each of the offices about this topic. I hope that I will be allowed to set up a centre of excellence around mental wellness in the London office for our global firm this time next year. So that's just some of the things. There's a lot more happening, and I'm not going to pretend it's perfect, but we have made significant strides over the last 5 years in particular, and last 12 months especially.
And just as an example, what Chris said, there was one, I just take off this point, it's not just a partner sort of problem. There was a very close friend of mine who's struggling with mental health issues. And he's, I think, told his supervisor eventually after consulting with his doctors and psychiatrists, and his supervisor, no questions asked, allowed him time off. He does part-time work, I think 3 days a week or 2 days a week, and he's allowed to do that for however long it takes to get back his mental health. He joined us, I think, in February 2019, sorry, so he's been here less than 6 months. So I genuinely think there's a culture where people not just talk about it, but also act on it, which is obviously the more important thing. So just to add on to that.
So this is a very logistic question, but can you please tell us about the timeline for the application process? So like when are the applications out? What are the months allotted for the internships?
Well, I tell you what I can do is, so for this year, for the internship program will result in people coming to London in summer 2020, that's all passed, all right? So you apply in your 4th year in July, August? Yeah? June, July, but all of the information will already be on our website. So if you go onto our website, graduate recruitment, Indian internship program, it's all there. So broadly, You will apply in June, July 2020. You'll be interviewed this time next year. If you're successful, you'll then join for the internship program in summer 2021. Right. We're going to draw it to a close there, all right? So thank you for your time and attention, and again, thank you for agreeing to be pre-payment. Thank you all.